I think that, this is a very important question because I think that for some reason, somehow, people have imbibed the notion. And by the way, when I say people, I mean people in general. I think that, in the world today, um, what may be termed sort of Western civilization has had a sort of broadly diffused hegemonic effect and influence all over the world. So in some ways, you might say that today there are no longer any completely non-Western peoples. I mean, there are varying levels of Westernness, but the influence of the West has been so pervasive that no one has been left untouched by it. And I think that coming out of that influence, there's this notion that there is some necessary, complete and total contradiction between heaven and earth. So that we can either be earthly and live life fully, or we can be heavenly and live life righteously. But the whole enterprise of trying to combine these two interests, it's an oxymoron. Whereas in point of fact, Islam is explicitly dedicated to precisely that reconciliation. Basically, if you go to the books of Islamic jurisprudence, basically there's a distinction between what are called the ibadat, or religious observances, things like prayer, fasting, pilgrimage, paying the poor, doing things like that. And then there is what are called the mu'amalat, and these are basically all of the rest of Islamic law. And these are things like marriage, divorce, inheritance, child custody, contracts, civic relations, and things like that. And in that area, it is universally recognized that the aim of all of these rules is to promote human welfare. And that, in fact, where the application of any particular rule threatens to undermine the welfare or the interest for which purpose it was handed down by God or the Prophet or interpreted by the jurists, if the application of that rule threatens to undermine that interest, it shouldn't be applied. Because the whole point of those rules are not simply to be applied as rules, it is to apply them in ways that realize the benefits and the interests that they were meant to realize. So there's a very practical and pragmatic dimension of Islam. And unfortunately, even many Muslims, have fallen into this, I would almost call it a Kantian notion of what they call a categorical imperative is. That if you discover what your duty is, you have to implement that with no exceptions, regardless of the consequences. And some people equate that kind of approach to religion with piety. That's not the practice of the Prophet Muhammad, and that's not the practice of the best expression of the Islamic tradition. One always looks at consequences. Islam forbids wine drinking. And by the way, if you look at the impact cumulatively of intoxicants on human welfare, between alcohol and heroin and crack, cocaine, and let's say marijuana, when you compare the negative impact that has come out of those things with the positive benefit that has come out of them, I think that there's no question that the negative has outweighed the positive. And very interestingly, in the Quran is very explicit. They ask you about wine drinking and games of chance. Say, O Muhammad, in them is sin as well as benefit for people. But the sin or the evil, the negative impact, outweighs the positive. This is the approach of Islam, period. Notice it doesn't deny that people will get some benefit out of getting high. Getting high can help people overcome inhibitions. It can help people drown out certain miseries. It can, give people the sort of push that they need to go into this interview or go on stage to do this performance or whatever. All of these benefits are there. But I saw a program once, a guy who was a recovering alcoholic, and he was now one of these motivational speakers. And he talked about the impact of alcoholism on a family, and he likened it to a wind chime, those things you hang up in the wind, and when the wind blows, they clink, 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 clank all over the place. And he said, it's like an alcoholic is at this stage, he's a great-great-grandfather or something, and the effects of his alcoholism will reverberate down through the generations, like those chimes in that wind chime. So even children who are innocent, never taken a drink in their lives, will be affected by the alcoholic-driven tendencies of these members of their families. I mean, the results are just horrific. It's in that context that Islam bans these things, not because Islam just doesn't want you to get high and have fun.